So good morning. Oh, the lights are bright. Okay. Good morning, everyone. It's very nice to have you all here. My name is Paula Monteiro.
I'm Dan Flanegan.
And this is the talk that we wish we had before we went through an acquisition. Click. So you might be here because you worked with me in the past. There's a lot of folks here. Or you're thinking of an exit for your company. You might be just curious what it feels like going through an exit. Or maybe you are planning one exit for your company. But whatever the reason is, we're very happy that you're here. And we are excited to share our experience.
So for a lot of folks, the opportunity to go through an actual acquisition process can be kind of a once-in-a-lifetime experience. So we want to make sure that you are able to kind of make the most of it. There have been a number of acquisitions in the XR industry. I think that this is an industry where many times it's hard to track the details related to those acquisitions because many times those aren't published, they aren't made public. But we do know that there are a couple things that kind of still hold true, which is that there are big players and tech behemoths that are looking at the XR space very closely, that have already made their bets, that are playing in the XR space. So there are definitely opportunities for acquisition. And I think the market and the use cases are becoming even clearer. So I think that the opportunities are out there. And we'll talk a little bit about the experiences that we had. But given everything that's happening, whether it's Apple or whether it's Meta, this is kind of the time to be looking at what this experience would be or what you should be preparing for when it comes to an actual acquisition. So I'll let Paula start to talk a little bit about our experiences specifically.
Yeah, so actually Dan and I were united by the power of an acquisition. It was 2021. I had been pretty much 8 years in the XR space, working for Wikitude as head of marketing. And then a Californian tornado hit us, and suddenly we were part of this exit. And it has been, such a nice and wild ride, but it was a very different thing because essentially Wikitude was a smaller company, still had a huge footprint, 150,000 developers. And when we were acquired by Qualcomm as part of a successful exit, everything changed. So let's just get here. Yeah, and then this year in January, I decided to take another role, still working in computer vision, but in the neighbor automotive industry. And looking for new exciting challenges there.
Yeah, so in my case, I've been a serial entrepreneur for a long time, and I've always looked for areas and technologies that are kind of being defined as they're being built out. So for me, XR was extremely interesting. I'd kind of dabbled in the space, but then I was introduced to a company called ClayAir that was doing hand tracking based on the positional cameras on any device. So essentially just with a software SDK, you could add hand tracking to a device without having to add any additional hardware. So I came on board. I was with the company for 2 years leading product. And having this type of SDK and this type of solution was something that was attractive to other companies in the space who are looking to build kind of an entire perception stack. And so we had the very fortunate opportunity of having worked with Qualcomm for a while, and that turned into an acquisition opportunity. So when I came on board, I joined the Snapdragon Spaces team, working on those perception features and also very closely with our developer community. I left the end of last year, kind of around holiday times, and decided to kind of jump into another entrepreneurial venture, which is Lot 2, where we're building kind of a web and XR platform to help storytellers get their stories out into the world.
Exactly. So Dan and I were working on the Snapdragon Spaces team for Qualcomm. But when we're thinking about an exit preparation, there are really two sides of the story. The first one is preparing the company for an exit and also preparing yourself as an individual or entrepreneur that is going to be integrated into this new company. And when we're thinking about, signs for a company looking for an exit, I really need to take you back to 2015. And you might remember when Metaio got acquired by Apple. I was in the middle of the ocean on my vacation, and then my phone started buzzing. Back then, I was head of Wikitude. Metaio was our biggest competitor. So my phone buzzed once, and it buzzed twice, and I'm like, is our website down? Like, is our developers, claiming that our server is down? And then it never stopped buzzing for the rest of the week, and it was the fact that our biggest competitor was acquired. So when I was thinking back then, I knew something was up. They recently had rebranded. They had a brand new shiny website. The messaging was on point. They had those very nice shiny demos that engineers hate but marketers love. The PR, the making sure that the customers were being vocal about the projects together. So picking up on these bits and pieces, you could see that something was up, and I was like, I knew it. I knew something was up. And this is very much part of the work of preparing for an exit, is making your company shiny and attractive for people to potentially buy it. I'm mostly talking from a marketing communication perspective because that's what I was leading before. But preparing goes all the way to doing the due diligence and preparing your systems and all of the checks. So yeah, once acquisitions happen very quickly and it takes everybody by surprise. But once it happens, then I feel like the big questions start to come in, like, what about our systems? Do we work together? Well, what about our product? We, as Wikitude, had thousands of paying customers and 150,000 developers. What would happen to their products, the solutions that they were offering based on the SDK? And for everyone that has been around, Wikitude was the largest augmented reality SDK that was independent from any other company. So, it was a generation, I feel like, of traumatized developers when it comes to XR tools, because Metaio was acquired, and then PTC acquired Vuforia. It took, a completely different spin on the enterprise side, and then Wikitude later was acquired by Qualcomm. So taking a product out of the market is also a big responsibility, because these people, their livelihood depends on your developer tools. So yeah, making sure that you're having a plan, have transparency, communication, which sometimes is very tricky, is the most beneficial for XR customers and the community that you're working with. But there's also the other side, which is the whole external communication. And I personally feel like acquisitions in XR, we suck at communicating acquisitions and exits. There's a lot of details that obviously cannot be shared, but it's this customer trust and the team trust, the team that is getting acquired. It's super important to make sure that there is some sort of outlook of what will happen. Will this product be sunsetted or not? Things will continue as usual, or the team. What will happen to the team? And yeah, so I feel like when you're jumping into this new context, one of the most important things is advocating for yourself and selling the team, because you're entering this large new context and nobody knows what your team was really doing before. You're one in thousands, so it's crucial to make sure that you're advocating for the team and just, yeah, presenting what you've done before and how you can make an impact.
And so the flip side of this, as you're kind of preparing your company, you're also thinking about yourself. And you have to be somewhat selfish as you're going through something like this, because depending on the position you're in within the company that's being acquired, you may or may not have a lot of say as to what your experience is going to be. So, one of the things you definitely want to focus on, which is key, which makes sense, is compensation. I would say that there's the acquisition and then there's your job. So to start to think about this as any transition like this, as a job interview, as a negotiation, in the same way that you would approach any new job opportunity. And you want to come in and because it's an acquisition, you might be able to really negotiate from a position of strength. The other big thing I would say is usually when you're an entrepreneur and your head's down and you're building something, you're not necessarily, unless you've hired a very big team and you're part of that process, you're not necessarily thinking about, gosh, what's my market value? You know, what are other people in corporate positions who have my role? What type of salaries do they have, or stock packages? So definitely consult others, and that could be, you know, in my case, I reached out to someone who actually helps folks negotiate their pay at big tech companies, and he was able to give me kind of comparables to other companies and similar positions. The other thing is your role. So should never be the assumption that, you know, hey, what you were doing at your startup is the exact same thing you're going to be doing in the company that acquires you. So make sure your role is clearly defined, always knowing that that can change in the future. Are you doing the same thing you were doing before? Are you going to be doing more? Are you expected to do something maybe completely different because the role you held, you know, in your startup is already taken by someone or a team within the company that's acquiring you? Who are you working for? Don't assume that it's, you know, your old boss, especially if you're obviously the CEO or founder of a company and you're coming in, you're most likely going to be reporting to someone on the management side of things. And back to the negotiation piece of things, you know, get things in writing. If, as you're coming in as part of the acquisition, if you're saying, hey, you know, I'm going to be able to work remotely, or here's what my travel expectations are going to be, or I'm going to be able to advise companies outside of work or not. If those are things you want to negotiate and if they're agreed to, then just make sure you have those in writing in some way. The other thing is context is key. So what I mean by that is, why was your company acquired? Was your company acquired for the people? Was it acquired for the technology? Was it acquired for relationships you have? Was it customers, or was it a combination of these things? Depending on your role and depending on the reason why the company was acquired, those things can sometimes not necessarily be in sync, so it might set the expectation of either how critical you will be to the team moving forward, or, you know, what exactly your role might end up being moving forward as well. And if you kind of don't understand this, it can be, you know, a rude awakening if all of a sudden you realize, oh gosh, you know, this project I was working on, or this key skill that I have, you know, someone else already fulfills that where I'm going. And the other thing, kind of one of the big things, is company culture as well. So, you know, how often does this company that you're being acquired by, how often, you know, how many times have they acquired other companies? Is there an opportunity for you to talk to employees who've joined the company through acquisition and get an understanding of the experience through them? And, you know, the big thing to me is, like, you may be acquired, you may have a culture in your company that matches well with the company that's acquiring you. You may not know the culture of the company that's acquiring you. But the one thing is, you will never change the culture of the company that's acquiring you. So you will become part of that culture, and you'll kind of adopt that culture, but you're not going to change the culture of a big company as you come in, no matter how kind of optimistic you might be about that, or if you feel it needs to change. Find a champion. Find someone internally who can support you, who can be your advocate. Many companies, I know, you know, Qualcomm does this, will kind of match you up with someone who can be your guiding light as you kind of go through this experience. Prep before, you know, kind of day one where things officially switch over. And what I mean by that is, just do as much as you can to understand, you know, the company, their processes, the team, the management and corporate structure, so you kind of go in, as I say on the last point here, eyes wide open. So you understand, you know, what you're stepping into, and that preparation will help you so much when it comes to, we'll talk about in a little bit, but like building relationships and being successful internally.
Yeah, and ultimately, you don't want to just survive an acquisition, but you want to thrive in the context of an acquisition, and that might mean staying in the company, or it might mean also leaving the company. But yeah, important here is just to understand this new reality. And I remember when Wikitude was acquired, I really wanted to learn how to corporate. I wanted a checklist. I wanted to, understand how I can be successful in this new, this new reality for me. And I remember that my instinct was just getting to know the people. So I think what was the most helpful thing for me to understand this new reality was booking my first 2 weeks, just connecting with people, understanding what they do, understanding how things work, understanding how I could potentially fit in this larger organization and how I could make the most impact, but also advocate for the team that came with me. So understanding the pieces, the bits and pieces was super important for thriving in this couple of years that I stay in Qualcomm. And also, as you are meeting those people, you will find your allies naturally and your champions who will help you understand what kind of opportunities there are inside.
And the other thing I think especially folks who are entrepreneurs or have been entrepreneurs multiple times, you tend to start to also think a little bit about, okay, how long am I going to stay here, and what's my life going to be like after this acquisition? I think there is that question about, should I stay or should I go? I know that in our acquisition, not everyone made the choice to come over, and that's a personal choice. And it's kind of, when it comes to choosing whether you're going to stay long term or shorter term, it's really to me about personal growth. It can be about pay, it can be about stability, especially when you're an entrepreneur. It's nice to have moments in time of stability. But I think at the end of the day, it's, are you growing as a professional, as an individual? Are you building that knowledge base? Are you building your relationships, or do you feel stagnant and that you need to jump out and kind of have a different opportunity? And I compare it to, in Fallout, it's like being in the vault or being in the wasteland. It's, in the vault, things are safe, but they're very structured. In the wasteland, it's dangerous out there, but you can go wherever you want. So that is kind of the comparison, and at least that I have in my head, and it's worth thinking of things that way. How do you leverage where you are now, like this acquisition, into a potential next opportunity? Knowledge is power. Build your expertise. While you have the opportunity, you've got tremendous resources, around you probably if you're in a larger corporate environment. Trusted relationships live beyond, your current job. So, impress your coworkers, be honest, work closely with them, and always have your eye open for problems that the company you're working for isn't solving, because maybe that problem that isn't being solved is an opportunity to start a new company. The first company I ever started came out of the idea that someone was knocking on the door of the company I was working for and asking for a specific product. And the company said, no, we don't want to build that for you. So some of us left and we built it instead. So build your network, that's okay. Build your network, your reputation, and not just internally, but within the industry as well. Again, this is an opportunity to maybe knock on doors and meet people because of the company you're working for that you otherwise, if you were just a solo entrepreneur, you wouldn't have the opportunity to get some face time with.
Yeah. So it's this, we're coming to the end of the talk, and it's this moment that we would like to share our tips or the things that we wish we knew before going into this. For me, it's mostly like you do you. You're entering into this new environment. It might work for you, or it might not work for you. It might work for you for a while, and that's okay. But if you're building awesome relationships in the place that you're going, this is gonna serve you throughout your career, either if you're in or out. But ultimately, understand what you can leverage from being acquired, like those learning resources, meeting new people. You'll be exposed to a lot of different working styles and processes. So take whatever is best for you and apply that to your career, whatever next step you want to take. and also enjoy the ride. I was so nervous on what was gonna happen to me, to my team, like, am I gonna be in a good place? Can I corporate? I always, was working on a startup environment. So I just wish I would have relaxed a bit more and enjoyed the ride. And hopefully, this is also, if you're going through an acquisition, this is something that you can take away. And I was very lucky. The folks made me also, have a smooth ride when I joined Qualcomm at first.
I always think that every time you go through an experience, you learn something new, for that experience that you didn't learn in the previous one, et cetera. So, I mean, for me, it's just, know your value. Don't sell yourself short when it comes to going from a small team to a very large team where you might feel a bit lost among the people and the culture and just the sheer size of things. As I said before, expand your knowledge while you're there, while you have the opportunity to get access to resources and smart people and networking and connections. And just prepare for your future in parallel, kind of, as you're having this experience. Because the last real, if you're an entrepreneur and you get acquired, the last real control you had was when you shook on that deal and you started your first day within the new company. There's probably been some tremendous upside for you, but you also are not in the same level of control as you were previously as an entrepreneur. So just keep that in mind as you're preparing for whatever the future may entail for you.
Good.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
For questions, maybe one or two, if the audience wants to ask these entrepreneurs.
Maybe I can start with a question. Has someone gone through an exit here? Oh, cool. Well, yeah. It's usually a once in a lifetime, and not so many people go through it. Yeah.
Any questions?
Yeah.
It could potentially take quite a while to get connections in those emails. How would you go about reaching out to those people and finding those champions when you might not have that communication or in-person contact?
Yeah, it's a good question. One thing that I did is I had fairly early on access to, at least in kind of our HR hub, maybe not the direct emails, but at least kind of the corporate hierarchy. So I was able to kind of look across groups and at least understand. So if I was in an early call or a meeting and I heard someone speak up, I kind of knew who that person was and then felt like I could, reach out to them, maybe chat during that virtual meeting or something like that. But it's tough early on, especially when you're going through the process. If you're an employee and you're not directly involved in the negotiation and you're thinking, wow, I'm hearing about all this stuff going on, like, how do I start to investigate this company internally? It's just it can be a challenge.
I used LinkedIn, throughout the process, and it was a long process. I already knew a couple of people that I would be in contact with, so I slowly started to add them and send articles here and there and start making those connections until it was the point that we were in the system, and then I started having those one-on-one calls and trying to figure out who was who. But definitely LinkedIn helped me.
Yeah, and I was fortunate because I had a very good friend and former colleague who worked at the company, so I was able to kind of communicate with him and get an understanding of like who was who and all of that before everything fully transitioned.
Thank you.